Hey guys, welcome to my first interview. I had the great honor to get a very young artist creator on named Landin, and he is amazing because he's full of this genuine positivity and love for the world, which he's trying to express through the work that he's doing. So we talked quite a bit about where it originated and how he was able to balance the challenges of life with this innate state that he's able to operate in. And one thing that really came out is that he's able to recreate his positive and loving version of the world very quickly in order to keep this creativity going by having a very diversified way of thinking. So this really kind of came out of this podcast, and that he's able to stay independent while still offering himself to the world by diversifying his love across many people, across the whole world, as opposed to just trying to focus it in on one person. So I learned a lot from this conversation. It was fascinating. It was deep. It was tumultuous. And I think that you really should hear that so that you can see that there's for sure more than one way to see the world and to do good with it. So let's get Landin on. Hello, everybody. I have Landin Soroko out for my first interview. So Landin, welcome to the Sovereign Self. Interview number 1. I'm actually really excited because it's kind of cool and I really like talking to people. So yeah, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be your first interview guest. Big fan of your work so
I think
far.
It's more of a risk than anything. I don't know if it's particularly an honor. I think it's as much of a risk for me as it is for you and vice versa.
I would say slightly more for you because you have a bit more to lose at this point.
Well, let's see. So you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and where you're at? Quick intro.
I'm Landin, you said that. I don't even know where to start. It's so vague. It's so open, that question.
I could give it a shot. I'll call you an artist. I've called you an artist before, and I don't know if you like it.
Yeah,
okay.
So I guess...
Len?
This is going to be difficult talking over each other. So I suppose I'm an artist. I guess I'm a photographer professionally, although recently I've had to be a little more creative with that. I currently live in Austria with my girlfriend. Where do I start telling
You have a famous
myself?
dad.
Yeah, I have a famous dad, I suppose.
How about that?
That's an interesting part. Yeah, so... I am the result of a Russian father and a German mother, but they split up, more or less split up before I was born. So I ended up growing up in Australia, which is a whole whirlwind of a story, which I don't have time to get into now. But
It's quite a lot. Quite a lot to start with.
It's a lot. Yeah, I don't even know. I've had so much happen in my short time that I don't even know where to begin talking about it, really, especially if someone just says, "Oh, tell me about you." I'm like,
isn't it hard?
Yeah.
Why do you think it's so hard? Like, I have exactly had that experience, and I guess in some way it could have possibly been a loaded question for you, because pulling yourself up in front of the world and saying, "Hey, who are you?" and to explain yourself fairly seems like it should be easy, but it's not. Why is it so hard? Why is it so hard for me? Why is it so hard for you?
I think the difficult thing is, for me, what I might say depends on how I'm feeling today. And so if I'm trying to create media that's transcendent of today, let's say a video, then I don't even know where to begin, because how I feel tomorrow about this video might change. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. So you're already
trying to predict who you want to be tomorrow while talking about yourself today. That's a complicated way of thinking.
Somewhat, perhaps. I'm not exactly sure. But I suppose that's part of it, for sure.
We talked a little bit last time about this idea of, having some form of objectivity towards yourself. And that's part of the things that I'm trying to do with this specific channel, is figure out how to describe yourself to yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And to different people, it means different things. For many people, it's a reverse narrative. That's what I found, that people tend to talk about what they've done and who they were to define who they are right now. But it seems to me, just even from that short interaction, you're talking about yourself already in the future. You're already talking about yourself as if you are existing in a reality that hasn't yet happened. Like, where's that coming from?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I suppose I feel on some level that I haven't accomplished a particularly large amount of things in my life so far. So I very much like to define myself by my values, which in some way also defines how I would like to move forward. I would like to be philanthropic, but I haven't had the resources to do that in the past. So I guess that attitude is sort of part of my identity, helping people. But I haven't had the opportunity to do that yet because unfortunately, helping people requires, at least on some meaningful scale, I think requires some monetary funding, and so I'm in the process of figuring out what's the best way for me to set myself up as the type of person that could help the most people.
How old are you, Landin?
That makes sense. I'm 21 at the moment.
So by 21, at the moment, let it continue. Yeah. How did you figure out your values by 21? I mean, I could barely tell heads from tails at 21, I think.
Yeah.
I don't really recall. How did you figure this out?
Yeah, I've wrestled with this kind of a lot myself because I've had this, over the past year or so, I've had this weird identity crisis where I have all these things, I understand all these things that are meaningful to me, but...
What do you mean by understand?
And
when you say you understand?
Sort of. I understand that, I know that my value, how do I put this? I know that I'm here to help with my heart and to, let my heart guide me. I know that much. And I know that if I follow my heart, things will probably turn out all right. But it's not that simple because you have to, translating what your heart is saying to your brain. There's a lot of layers to that, I suppose. You have to actually work within the society that we're given. You can't just run outside and start, helping people necessarily.
Doing good things?
I mean, you can, and there's a lot of people who do that, I suppose. You can go out and just directly help with your hands, but I'm a very large-scale person. Ideologically, I guess, and spiritually, yeah.
So have you already convinced yourself by the age of 21 that you want to dedicate yourself as a person, as a creative person, as an artist, to serving humanity, and you're already committing yourself to a lifetime of emotional servitude at whose expense? At yours expense? Who's going to pay for this?
I guess so. I'm not sure. Because I don't see it necessarily in that. The way you've just described it was this kind of grand idea for my life, but for me it's just common sense. It's like, yeah, my favorite, most fulfilling thing that I can do is doing good things because it makes me feel good and it's fulfilling. And what else? We are people who live with other people, and I don't see any reason. What else are we going to do?
Then hell, you do deserve that absolutely grandiose description. If you're somebody who can come up and get up in the morning and say, I actually want to dedicate my life to some form of emotional output. And I'm going to focus on making not my life better, but the life of other people better. That's huge. There's not a lot of people like that. And a lot of people do want to be like that, but they also have trouble. And I'm still trying to grasp that and understand that. And especially if this is so innate to you, I'd love to learn a little bit more about why you think it's a good idea. Because one of the things that I discuss is the concepts of, dependence and psychological dependence. And it links with the fact that we all try to find some meaning in life. But in order for you to come out and be responsible and actually successful in your endeavors for other people, you have to do it for no other reward than doing it itself. Because if you're going to try to look for validation or acceptance or admiration or monetary value, you become dependent on that. So if you're saying that at 21, you're ready to come out and you're ready to give yourself to this world so wholeheartedly and you're so optimistic about it, are you sure it's not going to make you miserable? And if so, why?
So I'll try and unpack that slowly. Well, firstly, I don't think you can give me too much credit for just having this worldview. Firstly, I have my mother is a great example who spent her entire life basically helping people without payment. she volunteered, and that's how she met my father. She was traveling through Russia for 10 years, and she did a lot of, she built up ashrams and helped out people a lot. And so I definitely have her as a big inspiration for, just live by love, kind of. But I don't think you can give me too much credit, because I would say I'm fortunate and perhaps privileged enough to even be able to think about helping other people. I've had thus far an amazing life. I don't have much money, and I don't have too many things, but I have more than I could really hope most people might have. Which isn't much. I'm not trying to say, oh yeah, I'm very wealthy or anything, but I am wealthy as far as I have a place to sleep and I have food to eat. And other than that, I see no reason. I don't. What else do I need? I guess that's just. I don't know. It's just so commonsensical for me to just see myself as I have everything I really need. I'm into photography and I like gadgets, and so I'll spend some money here and there, but I mostly consider that as sort of an investment to my craft of photography or videography or whatever I'm up to at the moment. But yeah, for me, I just kind of see it as
just innate.
I'm just
Is there
lucky.
a point in your life?
I'm really, really lucky. That's like, I don't know. That's why I'm so fortunate that, and I want other people to have at least what I have, which isn't that high of a standard, but I'm very lucky. I'm very fortunate to have it. So I'd like.
So is there a point in your life that you just kind of have come to that realization, have come to that acceptance of, this is what I want to do, to the point that you're able to come out on YouTube, to the internet, and maybe 20 people will see this video, maybe 20 million people will see this video, and we obviously don't know that.
Yeah.
But at what point have you decided it so innately that you're able to speak about it with such genuine, not even conviction, it's just genuine honesty, right?
Belief.
You're not trying to make it sound like anything more than what it is. And to me, I'm perceiving it as something to which you're still trying to find applicable words, right? You're still trying to explain this feeling that you have within you of what is that you're trying to accomplish. And that's probably one of the best signs of truthfulness that you can get, is that if you're trying to describe something which you innately understand to the extent that words don't fit it yet.
Yeah.
So when did this happen? Were you like 12, 14, 3? Like, where did this come from?
I have no idea. I just grew up. I suppose.
Just were?
I suppose I grew up with a mother. Well, I grew up with just my mother, so I think I have her to thank for a large part of who I am, I suppose. And she always had this attitude of, life is great. We have it good. Things are good, and I don't know. I suppose my values are also somewhat juxtaposed to people I see around me, and in the internet, which is I don't know how good it is as a base standard, because you're having this peek into people's lives, and no context really. I'm not really sure how to speak about that any better, but yeah.
Let me ask you this. What would happen? What would happen if I was to take you and magically transport you to a house in a desert, fully stocked with whatever, say, instruments or photography or whatever tools you needed, and left you alone? Like, if you were in complete solitude, how do you think it'd function?
I don't know. Why did you put me on the island? I'd have to. My first thought would be to question the question. I'm sorry, the way my brain works isn't. I'm very bad at working within some questions. So a question like that, my first thought is, why would you even ask a question like that?
Fair.
I don't think.
Let me explain why.
Like me ending up on a desert island. If I was on a desert island, I would. I don't know. Try. Would I have all the resources to? We have to expand this example a little more.
Absolutely.
So I have resources to live.
Resources to live. You don't have to stress about existence. The point of you ending up on a desert island is to really test these theories that you have about yourself, right? So this entire idea of solitude and creativity is something that you and I have talked about before.
Sure.
But I want to investigate a little bit more, because what I'm seeing is you have a strong passion and you have a conviction, and you're having trouble narrating that conviction, right? So you still haven't, to me, built this narrative explanation of your life, and nor should you, realistically, because you're in the early stages of this conscious development of it, right? Your brain doesn't even sorry, man, your brain doesn't grow in until fully you're 24. Like your prefrontal cortex doesn't develop.
Yeah.
So it's a loaded question from the start, right? I'm putting you on the spot. But that's actually why I'm so interested in understanding how such genuine conviction can exist. And is it something that is an attribute of your specific state right now and the beauty that you're seeing in life that maybe other people have lost or will lose in time as they get older? Or if it's something that, is really innate. And that's why I'm asking, if you were to be left alone, and if you have to imagine yourself alone, do you think you'd be comfortable? What would you spend your time on?
Well, there's something that you mentioned before about this this developmental process, which is something that I at least as far as I know, I've kind of been acutely aware of. Like my brain has been developing as I'm learning, and I slowly feel like I feel this expansion inside, and I feel that my ability to understand is growing, and it's this weird I don't know, it's this weird dance because I can't control.
You feel that? Is it pleasant?
I've noticed that over the last 2-3 years. I don't know if it's pleasant. I've been feeling this. I've always been more aware. It's like, oh yeah, I'm slightly more this since last week, or I'm more capable, or I have these epiphanies, and it's like this is something I couldn't have even considered a few weeks ago or a few months ago, and yeah, so it's interesting. It's something that I've thought about a lot actually, because it's true. Yeah, my brain is still developing, and I don't know what to do with that, and it's this weird. I think I have this weird self-awareness of that, and so it's definitely it's very interesting, because I hold myself to such a high standard, but then other people are like, oh, but you're only 21. It's like, yeah, but I know, but I have all these ideas, and there's these things that I know I'm going to do and that I know I need to do, and so yeah, I do have this conflict with how do I describe things, and how do I turn that into. I have to be creative about that. How do I turn these ideas about I just need to spread love? How do I turn that into something that actually spreads love? And I do have some ideas which we can get into later, but the ideas
to hear them.
Too much the point. But yeah, so the desert island. Would I be
before we go on to the desert island? I just want to note one thing, and this is just a statement. It's not even a question.
Yeah, okay.
One of the attributes that has very much caught my interest in you specifically is this ability to somehow tune into this developmental process as a source of positivity and creativity and inspiration. And I must tell you that most people do not have that. They have it as a sense of dread and fear and uncertainty. So if there's anything that you could tell somebody, and you don't have to answer this question now because I promised it wouldn't be a question. Apparently it is. But If there's anything that you can tell us by the end of this interview and think about it and kind of process it, is for how we can achieve that sense of excitement and pleasure associated with change, I think it can help a lot of people. And it may not be a question you may be able to answer for many years. Some people can't answer it at all. But that is a unique attribute that I can see you already offering to the world at whatever age you are, and showing that you can want to be good, do good, and feel good about it. And those things are definitely not obvious, and they're definitely necessary. That's my statement.
Yeah.
So back to the desert island.
Well, now I'm thinking about that. It's a good question, and that I suppose somewhat goes back to this idea of who I am right now, because I more or less have a few ideas about that. But it will probably change, maybe. If you had, I guess, rounded up, your question would be, what's one piece of advice you would give other people to, see the beauty that I see? Maybe something like that. At least that's how I heard it, and am able to compartmentalize it right now. So I suppose if you can trace back to that later, I'll try and think about that a little more, because I'm still on this desert island thing.
Yeah, please.
I don't know. Well, I don't want to be on a desert island. Firstly, I spent a lot of time in my childhood alone, because we lived in I went to a fine school, but the area that we could afford to live in didn't have any kids in it, so we kind of lived in a more rural area. Houses were kind of far apart. We lived in the bush, lots of snakes, lots of spiders, all that fun stuff. But I didn't really have many kids around me, so I really had to be quite creative about spending my time, and so that I think that definitely played a part.
What did you do?
Resonated with.
So you were okay with being alone? Because I actually have spent a lot of time alone as a kid. I did not like it.
Yeah.
I had a horrible time. Like, I honestly, it was not a good part of my life, not by anybody else's fault, right?
Yeah.
Except for maybe what was going on in my mind. And to me, hearing about the fact that somebody had a pleasant childhood of creative solitude, I wouldn't understand why.
Say pleasant. I was getting to
Tolerable?
Well, it wasn't it wasn't horrible. It was my childhood. It is just objectively what happened. I happened to be kind of alone, and through that, I'm able to see now that probably played a large part in my ingenuity to want to create my own fun, let's say.
Let's talk about that. Tell us a little bit more about how that happened. Like, how did you convert?
The how, I don't know. I can think about the why maybe. I don't know about the how. How did I convert that? I'm not sure. So I won't speak too much about my father, but he's a very, as you know, he's a very, very successful man. He's at the top of his field, and he's doing very well. He's an artist, for those who don't know. He's an artist. Yeah, he's a Russian artist. He's like a superstar artist. It's kind of this weird.
What's his name
niche. Again? Nika Safronov. So he's kind of this ultra famous person. Everyone knows him. Everyone kind of likes him. I think. I'm not sure. I haven't met everyone. He's a very successful, and he's a brilliant guy. He's not the best father as far as I didn't grow up with him, so he's he's barely a father, let's say, as far as my developmental cycle goes. But one thing that I can accredit him for is this idea that I have of what's possible. I think that's really important. The fact that I have this somewhat tangible example. It's like, okay, my father has, there is someone in my life that I know, that I'm related to even, that has accomplished this much stuff. And I've been thinking about how I can explain, these maybe almost delusion of grandeur that I have, that I can do all these things, is because I know how possible it is, because I can see it. And it's like this guy that I know who, is maybe good in these things, but maybe not in this. He's a rounded person at the end of the day. He is a person who just happens to be very good at, this one thing. But he's also not a very good dad. So I have this as I suppose, sort of a weird inspiration for, well, if he can do it, then, of course I can. It's just the cards I've been given are about as good as you could want, let's say. I don't have everything, and I don't know everyone, and I don't have all the money, but I kind of a thing that I've been thinking about recently is the cards that I've been given are a lot better than a lot of people who have done a lot more than me, including my father. He grew up in a very poor family, and he still managed to accomplish this big thing, and he supports a lot of people now. He supports a lot of his family. And overall, I think he's a good person. It's complicated, because I don't think anyone who's truly good is only truly good. There's a lot more.
That's a tangent and a half.
More to a person. What you see isn't the whole person. I think that's why conversation is so good, because you can kind of bridge. The more you talk, you can bridge these kind of your worlds and brains.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of experience. It's a huge amount of storytelling that has to happen. So you have this fascinating and somewhat absent father figure. You have this place where you're basically living in relative solitude. So on one side, you have this tremendous inspiration and motivation to be like your father, and knowing that this is accomplishable and to some degree tangible.
It's just here's an example of where one could be. And so I think for me, I think that's what maybe a lot of people are lacking, and that's maybe part of the reason why I'm sure it's possible to experience that later in life and to have these realizations. But I think the reason why I had this realization so early about, I can actually make a difference, whether it's, for 100 people.
So it was that example, right? It kind of clarified for you that this is in the realm of possible.
And also even my mother too, because she spent her entire life doing what she loves and helping people and not making any money for it. And she's here, and she's a great person today. And so, I have this example of my father on this end of the spectrum and my mother on this end of the spectrum. They both accomplished everything they could possibly want in life. And, they've done it. And so I think it's important. I think that balance of my mother and my father are quite helpful to my opinion. I keep mentioning my father, but I guess the mother part is just more common sense. It's just more part of my life because I grew up with her. So I rarely think about it as much as I might try to compartmentalize my relationship with my father and how that's affected me. But yeah, I'm super lucky that I have this tangible. Examples are important. It's like examples of things. You know, if you can see that someone has done something, then you know. When someone
so let me maybe dig into this a tiny bit more, because this is really interesting to me. Like the way that you're describing it is, again, so full of love and positivity, and I'm just trying to track it back and understand it to what I think the source may be, right? And this is all again my personal theories, so bear with me. I could be 100% wrong, so tell me that too. So it sounds like you have these two amazing people, and amazing people understanding that they have their complexities as examples of what can be accomplished from the early stages of your life. And was that something, having those two examples and having those two examples of genuine emotional good and a desire to contribute to the world, did that help you get through the solitude? Is it something that kind of impacted your ability to, develop yourself, angling towards positivity and good as opposed to despair and loneliness?
I see those as two different questions. Did it help me get through the solitude? I don't know. I don't think I can say that it helped me because I just did. I had to grow up. And I fortunately didn't have a temperament that would, maybe lead me to suicide or something like that, luckily enough. At least not taking that thought seriously enough as some people might, because that's, I suppose, also a spectrum. When you're alone, you'll have every kind of thought. But I had to get through it. So I don't even know if at least at the early stages, now it's helping me a lot to really think about who I am as a person. But I don't, it was a very unconscious endeavor to get through being lonely, because it happened 20 years ago, happened 10 years ago, let's say. And I didn't, it just had to do it. And so now that I've done that, I've come out with this experience, and so I can kind of think about it now. But obviously as a growing child, I don't actually remember a lot about my childhood. I don't remember. What's
your overall impression? Like, was it painful? Was it exciting? Was it happy? Like, what was it like?
All of the above. I think all of the above, and now my overarching idea is that I'm appreciative of everything that happened. While it was happening, I had good days, I had bad days. I was very lucky because we didn't have a lot of money, contrary to what some people might think, as having my father as my father. But it was always one of my mother's main goals to save up every year, and that was take me traveling once a year, because she loved seeing the world and she really wanted to share that love of traveling for me, and exploring cultures and seeing different cultures. And so I think that's also a very big part of my openness towards different people, is the fact that I grew up once a year traveling. We went to Asia, we went to Europe, we went to Russia. I got to see all these different people, and that helped a lot with my idea of the world, and seeing quite early on that everyone is kind of the same. Everyone wants love. That's the one thing I'm sure about. I'm not sure about really anything, but I am sure that everyone wants, or at least needs, love, even if they don't know they want it.
Why do they need love? Why do we need it? And is it not a bad thing to need something from somebody else in order to exist?
Well, it depends what it is. I think yes, it's maybe for material things. It's to need that.
Even emotional, right? I'll give you a perfect example, right? If I'm emotionally dependent on my wife or my daughter or my friends or my parents to be happy, then it's actually on them to make me happy, right? And when we say that everybody needs love, is it not saying that we're potentially setting yourself up for dependency?
Well, we have to. On some level, I agree. It's like, yeah, being dependent isn't great, and I think many people have there's examples of people that have survived their entire lives alone, and they've lived, I don't know, in the wilderness or whatever, and there's great examples of that. But for us, we do live with other people, and we're going to have to live with other people for the rest of our life. So I don't know if thinking about it as us being dependent is the right way of really thinking about love, because we are going to, well, firstly, it's just a given. We are a people of people, I suppose.
Of course. There's
So
no greater meaning in life than the ability to
I
love,
don't think
right?
thinking about it as a dependency is the right way of doing it. It's just something that is, it's just innate. I don't know. I haven't really analyzed the love thing, but I know that love makes everyone feel better. Feeling loved is the best thing that can happen.
Let me ask you this.
Everyone knows that, I think, on some level.
How many people do you love?
Everyone.
5? Everyone.
I love everyone.
You literally love...
Okay. Sure, it's a spectrum. I don't respect everyone, but I do have an innate deep love for everyone.
So that could actually be potentially the source of what this feeling is that you're describing, actually. And this is changing my mind a lot about even the understanding of the nature of love, because in the work that I'm trying to do, I'm trying to focus on the individual relationships of love. And that is where the concept of dependency and the issue of dependency really stands true, right? Because you don't want to put the weight of your happiness on one single person. But it seems to me that through your experience and through your childhood, you've figured out a different way. And this is what I find really valuable. I think you may have potentially figured out a way to be happy by loving everyone and benefiting from some people loving you, right? So the fact is that you're creating a diversified number of people, and your happiness is dependent in little bits on many, many people, right? And if one of them doesn't love you back, it's not catastrophic, right? Even if half of them don't love you back, or maybe 3/4 don't love you back, there's still enough people that do love you that it's both a benefit to you and it's not a weight on them. So is this where you kind of having this sense of overwhelming love and desire to help the world and the creativity that's fueling it come from?
Okay, I'm going to try and... You say a lot of things in very quick succession, and I'm trying to compartmentalize. It's all right. It's all right.
Let me simplify it a little bit.
No, I do have something to say.
Yes.
You mentioned that the thing about, having some people that love me and some people. I do feel a lot of pain as well. There's a lot of anguish in me when someone doesn't, let's say, reciprocate small bits of love. I don't think love has to be, oh, I love you, or I want to be with you. It doesn't have to be. I wrote about this last night when you mentioned the solitude, emotional pain, and creativity. What was I just saying? So
what we were talking about, no, that's okay. I think it's exactly how these type of thoughts really have to come to be, because if you
it's new.
If you already thought about them, it's different.
I love that about conversation, that it should be thinking. Yeah. So I'm happy.
What you said was that I asked you if your ability to diffuse the target of your love amongst many people helps you become, independent from them, because there's multiple people who can return your love, and if one doesn't, it's not the end of the end of the world. But you said that you do acutely feel pain of rejection or disappointment when it does come to personal interaction, and somehow those two can coexist. Like, it doesn't create resentment or anger.
I always try to take the positive. I mean, I don't want to say it like I take the positive of everything, because that sounds like a mindset. It's not a mindset. It's just how I am. I have to take the positive out of things. And so I guess what I would take from that kind of realization, that pain, I suppose, would be that, oh, well, this is how other people feel too. So I also have that. So I know that I would like to create whatever the opposite of that pain that I feel is for other people, because I don't want anyone to feel like that. I don't want anyone to feel unloved. And so that's just an innate feeling that I have too. So
if somebody doesn't return your love, is it something that you blame yourself for not being able to properly communicate potentially? Like, is that what you're trying to maybe explain, or am I misunderstanding?
It's definitely something I've wrestled with. And that's part of this problem of maturing self-consciously. Is a lot, a few years ago when my I would say teenage relationships, it obviously it can really destroy you to be rejected or something, and because you're kind of an emotional, sensitive being. and you just kind of you're hypersensitive to the things that are happening, and obviously you're not too good at reflecting because your brain isn't that developed. And so what was it that you just mentioned, and how does what I just say relate to that?
So what I mentioned was this. When it comes to you trying to connect with somebody and under this condition of perpetual love for everybody, is the pain that you mentioned a consequence when you're not getting reciprocated love, when somebody doesn't return your love? Is the pain a consequence of some sense of failure, maybe on your behalf, of being like, I wasn't able to make them love me because I haven't communicated properly? Or is it something different?
I think I've grown out of that kind of blaming myself. And that's helped me form one of my biggest values, which is to try and see the world, to try and see everything objectively, which isn't to delude myself that I can see everything with absolute objectivity, but at the very least, I understand that every situation has at least two sides to it. So if someone has hurt me, it's probably not because they were trying to get at me, firstly, which I think is a lot of mistake people make about how people treat you, is that, they're really, they want to hurt you. So they break up with you to hurt your feelings. But I don't think that's true, because if someone, I think it's a dance. It's 50-50. If someone doesn't reciprocate your love, it's somewhat to do with them, and it's somewhat to do with you. So I think that helps me get through
Explain
the day.
that a little bit more, please, because it's actually something that would be really helpful for me to understand personally, right? So you're saying, okay, I understand the fact there's two sides to the story, and you can experience the same facts, but interpret them in different ways. And the difference in interpretation can still justify both behaviors, right? You may have a situation where both people are correct and both people are wrong at the same time. Yeah. But you're saying that it's like a dance. What exactly do you mean by dance?
Well, it's 50-50. If it's everything is two parts.
Just as much as
nobody is right 100% of the time, firstly, and you have to assume that a lot of the time you're not going to be right, and so that helps me a lot. Just using the statistics, because it's hard to think statistically. I think it's nearly nigh impossible to just think. I would say it's impossible to think statistically, but taking statistics like nobody is right 100% of the time. Not me, not someone else that I'm contending with or has hurt me, and so I think at the end of the day, you can't change the way someone feels. You can't make someone love you, so you can learn from it, and you can take from that. And there was a thought that I just had from these notes that I took, because I think I wrote a very nice, concise little passage here yesterday. So you were just talking about. So I do lose my train of thought a lot, which I probably need to breathe more and drink more water.
Yeah, I'll just recap the last 45 seconds.
Sorry that this keeps happening. Yeah.
That's fine. I actually like it. That's how I think I actually just try to remember. Well, I remember more and just try to link things up again. And that's why I like having these diversified conversations about multitudes of subjects. Because to recap, we're talking initially about the fascination that you have with this creation of universal love and universal good. We talked about how it could have potentially come from some form of example from your parents, but also the solitude that you've potentially experienced, and you clearly have had some developmental process that's come to it. And now you're projecting this love, the ability and capacity for love to many, many people in the world, some which you know, some which you don't know, to the point where, because there's many of them, it makes you invulnerable to a degree and not dependent on one specific person. But you're still able to feel the pain of some form of rejection, but you seem to have come to the conclusion that rejection is not solely your fault, that it's at least a 50-50 game. And that is, in some way, I guess, a consequence of both people's actions. So does that make sense so far? Yeah, well, if
the dance doesn't go well, then it's two people. So I'm having so many thoughts that I'm trying to work.
Let's talk about the dance. Let's try to focus on a little bit on this idea of the dance.
The dance is just a way I think about things.
What does dance mean? Does it mean like there's this like
is a mutual thing that's happening? It's this. I guess you could think about it in a lot of levels, but I think life is a dance.
Is it positive? Because you don't dance with somebody you hate, right?
Well, you can. It will, depending on how you think about it. A war is a dance between, in some way. I guess my idea of dance is very metaphorical. It's not physically.
You sound heavily positive.
It's not two people dancing necessarily, but it's a
right. It's like a game, right? There's an engagement.
You're engaging. Gotcha. You're working together. If the dance goes, if you're both kind of want to dance and you both. This is going way too deep in something into a topic.
That's fine. I'm actually going to turn this around a little bit.
Okay.
I'm going to turn this around a little bit. And, if you do find that paragraph, I would love to hear about it. But I do want to come back to the very beginning of the conversation.
It's not very organized. It's not something that I necessarily want to... because you mentioned that you'd like to talk about solitude, emotional pain, and creativity. Yeah. I wrote, I think solitude and emotional pain can be doorways to understanding that neither you or anyone else really knows how to be. And thinking, I think it's might not even make any sense if your reaction...
It doesn't have to make sense.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking. I just close one eye when I'm thinking sometimes. I don't know why I do that. I just do that.
No, it's okay. Don't worry. This is our dance, is, us trying to figure out the other person. So this is a dance as well. Yeah, exactly. Okay, sorry, already got more moves than me. When you accept that nothing really exists, then you can start it up. Start being creative. So I was trying to link the solitude, emotional pain, and creativity. I'm going to need to think a little slower about this because I'd like to expand on that because I still think that's a good point. Because you were asking me about how I'm creative, I guess, is somewhat the moral. Is how has my life turned me creative, kind of, or how to become more creative, something like that.
So what I was actually trying to dig to, if I asked that at the beginning, that'd make for a one dry conversation. What I'm trying to understand is what is it that's making you feel that motif, creativity?
Let's say, yeah,
right. But motif. It seems like you don't have to be able to explain something for it to work.
No,
right, and that's I think probably a big takeaway. I think from this conversation, even to me, is that you have these types, archetypes, objectives, things, values that you've mentioned that seem to drive you in a way that is innate and to some degree incomprehensible to yourself for now, right? But then we have this abstract field, the force of good or the force for love and compassion, which is something that you've absorbed from the world in the years that you've had. And you're able to take that abstraction and convert that into specific projects. That's actually the gap that I would like to understand how you close, right? How do you take that inexplicable sense of worldly love and forgiveness? And because from what it sounds like, I haven't had you mention one single angry or resentful or sad word. You seem to have somehow forgiven the world already. And I'm sure it has done you wrong. And as you said, you have experienced pain, you've seen pain, but it doesn't even seem to bother you. That's how it comes off. So it's like, it's almost like it's a non-starter conversation about blame. So some may have this instance of A, forgiveness, and then B, return and redemption for everything that you've already experienced and the desire to give. So I'm trying to comprehend how you can come from this very abstract state of love and, well, how and why would you turn that into something that's so specific as photography or a picture or a project or even a conversation? Like, how does that conversion happen? What is it that makes you want to sit down and do something good for somebody? Even for me, like you maybe did me a favor to have this interview, right? And I understand it caused you some measure of discomfort. And you did that.
It didn't. I wouldn't say negative discomfort though. I would think formative discomfort. This is overall a learning experience for both of us. To kind of answer everything you said, I don't know, and I don't think I don't know how important the knowing is. Because I try to be more analytical of things, and I try to put my ideas into words. But even just reading the words that I wrote yesterday, I can't expand on them because that's not where my mind is right now. So I guess I'm just very free. I flow like a tree. I don't know. I'm just kind of...
Sure. Do you ever get mad?
Yeah, I do get mad, but I don't get mad for long.
Okay.
That's an interesting thing that I've also thought about. Is I'm never mad for more than like an hour or two, and sometimes even that makes me a little mad, because it's kind of like, I should be mad at this person because they shouldn't have done that to me, and they shouldn't do that to anyone. But then I'm like, but it's okay. I'm okay. They're okay. The world is still okay, and so why keep being mad about that? Why focus my
Is
energy?
it because they didn't hurt you? Like, or they didn't hurt you much? Like, how easy is it for people to hurt you?
Well, depends. It depends on what you mean by hurt. Someone could punch me in the face. I wouldn't like that, and I probably wouldn't talk to them for a while.
Sure, that's reasonable. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
If I came to you and I said, that little cactus on your table, I really don't like that. That is an ugly ass cactus. What is that going to make you feel?
Well, it doesn't affect me more so than I feel bad that you. I feel bad that you don't appreciate nature, but I also, fair enough. I mean, whatever. You're
right, but bingo, right? That was actually fascinating as a tiny little experiment, right? So what I did is that I expressed unbiased hate. I targeted an innocent little cactus for something it absolutely has no control over.
I also know you didn't mean it genuinely. Because nobody doesn't like little. I mean, it's not something that I would ever. If you can think of maybe try and think of a more. Because I like thought experiments.
I actually won't, really, and the reason why is because even that, it was an oversimplified example. It was completely non-serious. It was ridiculous. But even the thought process there, rather than you even acknowledging the fake hate or mistake that I'm making and saying why, like that's actually what somebody would have, who engaged in conversation, who was actually entertaining the possibility that said cactus was ugly, rather than saying why and explain or rationalize, you say, well, you just probably don't feel well. It's like, oh, it's too bad that you're feeling that. I'm sorry. So you actually did not engage with my question at all. You don't entertain that reality.
Part of my mind did want to question that, but I don't think it's because I did that kind of with the island before by just like questioning. It's like, okay, well, let's take a step back. It's like, why are you putting me on an island? That's not something that ever happens to anyone, so it doesn't seem like a realistic thing that I should need to think about.
That's a different thing.
Yeah, but it's still kind of a hypothetical that you said, and that insulting the cactus was also somewhat hypothetical. But I think it's not that productive if every time you ask a question, it's like, why'd you ask the question? So
I think you're just trying to outsmart me now.
I don't think that's possible.
Yes, it is. But thank you.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Sorry. Anyways, so aside from my questioning of your plant choices, what was really interesting to me, again, in that exchange, and maybe this is part of the secret that you have in having this unconditional love for the world, is that you somehow have been able to identify a way to see people's responses from more than their appearance, right? It may look like I was being mean or I was being judgmental, but you would have probably realized that it's coming from some form of insecurity.
I mean, if you genuinely
say, I'm sorry.
It seems like a weird thing to point out. Like, I don't like that mirror in your background. It's like, well, it's kind of, I don't know. It's also very, I guess.
So you're not letting things stick, I guess.
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting point. I don't know anything. I think that's really
frankly,
important. I think my realization that I really just don't know anything, and I don't know how the world works, and I don't think anyone really knows anything. Nobody can prove that we really exist, and so, just... Yeah.
Oh no, we're ending on that note?
Yeah.
Torpedo in the water.
Yeah, but once you realize that nothing is really real, then I don't know, just you got to be creative. You got to make it up. Everything is made up. This is a table because someone said it was a table, and then it's whatever. And so I think realizing that this is going back to this idea of having an example. This is my example of knowing that everything is made up is also my example of, oh, well, I can also make things up. And why not? It's cool. It's fun. And if I can do that and also make people feel loved, that's the best combination. I don't have a very good reason to connect those things, but I do connect them.
Well, maybe not particularly narrating a reason, but actually one of the fundamental principles of belief, and you can ask this of religious people, specifically like very religious people, and you come to them and say, why do you believe in God? And they say, because I have faith. And then you ask them, what is faith? and they say, this is something that I deeply feel in my heart as love, right? And this is a narrative that permeates every religion in the world. Everything at the end of the day comes to this concept of faith. And perhaps your creativity comes from a notion of faith that you've developed for yourself, and a process that still boggles my mind, although we've kind of tapped into some parts of it.
A little bit,
and obviously, this was never supposed to be something you uncover over like a 45 or 50-minute long conversation.
Yeah.
What I really took that was of value here was that people like you can exist. And, even though I've been kind of prodding and questioning and tapping things, realistically, I've been kind of trying to disbalance you even with the questions, not intentionally. Like, it's not coming from a place of, I'm going to set this guy up because I don't understand. I'm like, man, this isn't how I think. This isn't how I think. I didn't think that's possible. How about that?
I noticed exactly. So I'm exactly on the opposite side of that. Like everything you say is so well formed, and you can be continuous. And I can't do that. I can't talk for 20 minutes without kind of losing track. But I think that's also an insight to how my brain works versus yours. Is you're very organized, but the fact that I kind of reset every 5 minutes, I think also gives me that opportunity to think.
Is it an opportunity to see the world?
I have to go from the ground up every time I start thinking about things. I think that could be like I mentioned last time we talked about, is this idea of first order thinking. It's like when you have a problem, just start from, because I don't remember so many things that I just, if I have a problem, I'll, start thinking from the start and then build my way up. And the same way I kind of work with conversations, and it's like, what were we just talking about? And so that's just an example, I suppose, of how my brain works in general.
So I think I have a new theory. Okay. Bear with me.
Please.
I have a new theory about the creative mind, because what you just said kind of clicked this whole conversation in for me.
Brilliant.
And it was that you're able to quickly reset your view of the world and test it out iteratively. And the fact that you're having potentially trouble connecting the narrative and keeping that train of thought allows you to see things for what they are more frequently, to refresh more frequently than I do. For me, I have a good memory. I've trained it over years and years and years. Mm-hmm. And it is very useful in some aspects, but it can be a complete pain in the ass, especially when it comes to, personal relationships and creating new views of the world, because I remember too many things, because I try to make sense of too many things, because I try to load them up into memory. And in my own arrogance, I try to assume that I can create some semblance of facts and sequenced facts that allow me to interpret and predict the world. Yeah. And if I was to even say, if I could chop my memory in half, that would, I think, make me even to some degree a happier person. And maybe in some way, the fact that you're able to go through so many things and so many different iterations at the same time, that is part of your creativity. And maybe creativity, it is that. It's the ability for you to see the world anew in every 5 minutes, every hour, every day. And that breaks the hold of negativity that comes from a terrible set of events that may have happened to you. As I'm sure you've had terrible events in your life, of shared terrible circumstance, and come to some form of peace with the past because it's just no longer relevant. But what's present in the moment is your state of love, which you distribute to everybody around you, and hence are in some degree independent. And that kind of gives rise to your ability to be creative, because there's no punishment for being creative if you limit the dependence on the past, I think. What do you think?
Well, what you said there resonated with me in a few ways. It brings up one kind of anecdote that, most music is a derivative of another type of music. Is like I think a lot of times you've probably seen this before, where there's a song and then it's being called out for using exactly the same riff as this other song, and usually the artist will say, "Oh, I didn't even know about that." So I think this idea of forgetting what you already know and just letting your heart kind of inspire you is like you're making what you think is an original song, and on some level it is. But you've probably heard this other song that exists, and you've just unconsciously taken parts of that. And I suppose that's what I do, and that gives me this sort of unconscious comfort to do, because if I realize that everything I was doing has been done by someone else, then I don't think I think I would be less creative, interestingly enough. And so the fact that I do forget everything that I already know somewhat when I'm thinking about a new problem, and I rarely think of it. It's rare to me. Well, I'll think of a product or whatever, and then I'll know it exists. That's a big, when it comes specifically to things that I'm designing, that's also different. But I linked those two ideas between like this, idea of people writing songs, which is a very, very creative endeavor, and yeah, see, again, I've kind of blanked, and it's, I don't know. Fine. But I also, one thing that I've recently come to terms with is that I'm kind of okay with the way my brain works, because it is kind of annoying. Like right now, having a conversation, the fact that I blank every few minutes, and I could. I like it. If I really tried, I could work through what I just said and listen to myself maybe. But I kind of. I'm learning to really appreciate it. You talked at the start, now this is me trying to link things back. You talked at the start, what's one thing I would kind of, because I think we're nearing the end, what's one thing I would kind of advise people, or what's one thing I would tell people at the very least if they would listen to me. Be okay. Firstly, be okay with how you are inside, like genuinely. The way you feel means something, and it matters. And obviously, you need to be able to remove what is lust from real love. I think it can be, those things can be disguised as one another, or at least lust can be disguised as love in your brain or whatever other part of your body. And so, just believe that how you feel matters, and maybe write it down and then figure out if it's real. But yeah, whatever comes out of your heart matters, and you should listen to that, and that'll help you out, I suppose. I don't know. I don't really have a way to round that out, but whatever I just said felt right. Good.
Well, yeah. Sounded deep.
Yeah, it sounded deep. Yes. Put that on awesome. A t-shirt.
Sure, I'm up for it. Yeah. Well, it's awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on and for doing this and for having this type of conversation. And thank you for putting up with me and my infinite and changing questions.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't a chore at all. Yeah. No, thank you so much. It was an honor, and you're a great person to talk to, and I really like you. So thank you.
I like you too.
Thank you.
That could be a t-shirt. I like you too.
Yeah, I like you too. You could try taking a quote from your interviews and then somehow turning that into something. That could be fun.
Sure, actually, I'm up for that. That's actually not a bad idea.
Talk about that later.
I'm really looking forward to seeing what you're actually going to do with this, because I think you're onto something. I don't know how you come up with it. I can barely even begin to comprehend it. You're living it, and live it, man. Like completely live it. Try it out. Don't lose it. Don't let anybody tell you you're wrong. That's my suggestion, because I don't think you're wrong. Man, just do what you got to do, because I think you're really onto something. And I think if you can keep that mindset and be fair to yourself, you can do really, really amazing things. And to a degree, that is your responsibility, right? That is where you've already assigned meaning to your life from the very beginning, saying that there's something in me that I need to offer to the world to make it a better place, that I'm willing to accept pain for it, and I'm willing to accept suffering and even take on the suffering of other people and forgive them before it even happens, right? That's crucial. And I think if you can put that into some form, be it art or word or music or behavior or whatever, that allows people to learn that and to mimic that and to embrace it, well, you're already going to change the world to some degree. So go you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
You as well. I hope this goes well. I have a feeling that this will go quite well for you if you really, keep your heart in it. I've seen that it's, been a little you have ups and downs, because your first video, big peak, and then kind of a little bit of a trough, as if you were talking about statistics, but just keep doing it, I suppose. I don't know. I guess I could give you the. I think this, but obviously, I'd like to say it as well, that just keep doing what you're doing, because there's also, this is your passion project, your heart project, let's say, and following that will result in something meaningful as well, at least from where I see it.
So I hope.
Yeah.
Thank you, man. Well, Thank you very much. Talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Rock on. This is going to be fun, and man, all the best.
Awesome. Have a great day.